Okay, good morning. Happy Friday to everybody. Thanks for joining us for this morning's coffee talk with PAR as our focus and their legislative work that they've done over the year and what they're looking forward to doing in 2025. But before we hand it over to Chris, just want to look ahead to Monday, 9 o'clock. We have another coffee talk scheduled, and that will be with the L&I Commissioner, Bridget Greenwald. We hope you will join us for that. We know a lot of you interact with L&I from time to time to get your work done and to help your clients out or to maybe progress along with a development project. So it's really great to have that opportunity to interact with the L&I Commissioner. So Chris will be doing that 9 o'clock Monday morning. I hope to see you there. And of course, if you can't make it in person, you can always go ahead and check out videos in our YouTube library. All the videos are there. If you missed yesterday's agreement of sale workshop with Trent Pettis, that will be up there at some point today. That's a little bit bigger file, so I think it takes a little bit to get up there into the YouTube channel. But great turnout yesterday, and that's always a very, very watched video when we put those up there. For the grizzled veteran and the newbie, it's always good to stay on your game, so please check that out. So with that, good morning, Chris. How's it going?
Good morning, Matt. I'm good, buddy. How you doing today?
Good. A little chilly out there. Cold walk with the
Yeah,
dog.
definitely cold out there this morning. I will get started if we're ready. I'm really excited today to have Sherri on. Uh, Gotten to know Sherri a little bit from my time up at Harrisburg and just really respect and value all the hard work that she does. She's the Chief Advocacy Officer for PAR. She's responsible for the development, implementation, and management of the association's comprehensive advocacy, legislative, regulatory, and political programs. Wow, that's a lot. That's a mouthful, Sherri. Basically, she makes sure any bills, any legislation are being mindful of things that are near and dear to our mission statements on the local and the state level. I just having those eyes and ears. We're all busy. Our members are busy running their businesses. Having someone like you out there looking out and your team is really, really important. So I just want to make sure our members get a sense of that as we talk through this. But again, just I'll let you open it up. I know you joined PAR in 2014, but I'm just going to let you talk a little bit about yourself and give us a little more of that background, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. And Chris, Matt, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this next hour or so chatting. Yes, as you mentioned, I joined PAR in February of 2014, so coming up on 11 years that wow, can't believe that. And actually, my total time working with realtor associations now is getting just crazily close to 20 years. So prior to joining PAR, I was actually the local government affairs director for the Greater Harrisburg Association of Realtors. So for a little over 7 years working with the local realtor association and then moved to the state association to kind of have that background on both local politics, but also in state politics. And so I've been in this role with PAR a little over 4 years now. Really enjoy every moment. We have a great team around us. It's a total team of 8 people right now, in addition to working with our other partners and teammates at PAR. And we've just been able to accomplish some good stuff. And I'm very excited to kind of talk about it here in a few minutes.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. So obviously very busy, right? Legislative season, but there was some uniqueness about it, right? For the first time in more than a decade, the House and the Senate were controlled by two different parties. Can you talk a little bit about that division and how you work through that?
Sure. Pennsylvania has a distinction, or at least had a distinction for the 2023-2024 legislative cycle, in that we are the only bicameral state legislature that was actually controlled by two different parties. Every other state, it was either R's controlled both House and Senate, or D's controlled both House and Senate, and Pennsylvania had this distinction. A lot of this just kind of going back in history, back to the 2022 election, when the House Democratic Caucus actually took control of the House for the first time in well over a decade and a half. and kind of in a surprising fashion. I think Pennsylvania went through a legislative redistricting after the 2020 census. And based on the new maps, I think there was this general consensus that, the House Dems might really have a good chance of taking control back of the House. But that probably was more a looking out into 2024 with presidential election, all those sorts of things. And so when they actually flipped the House in 2022, it kind of took everyone by a bit of surprise. And so at the same time, of course, we also have a brand new governor. So we have a new administration coming in that brings its own changes and priorities and things like that. And so January was a little bit complicated. Um, Throw on top of this, the House was really only controlled by one vote. So the Dems had 102 seats to the Republicans 101. Anytime you get a chamber that's controlled by one or two votes, it can be a very precarious a majority because everybody got to stay together, and so it can do things. It can be a little bit more challenging that way, and so. Along with all of that, one of the other things we really experienced was really twofold things is we had a lot of differences and changes in committee chairs and leadership chairs, not just with the Dems coming in, but also new chairs at several of our key committees on the Senate side, new leadership in the Senate side, in that Joe Pittman became the majority leader. And so all of these swirling changes as we kind of kicked off this legislation, a lot of it was like, well, let's see how this plays out and what we're going to get in terms of leadership styles, priorities, all that sort of thing. And right away in early 2023, actually several House members were elected to other office, so they had to resign. So we went through this special election process that kind of delayed some of the activities going on in the House. Actually, as it turns out, in total, last legislative session, we had a total of 9 special elections in the House, which is extraordinary for a 2-year cycle. And so, navigating all of this and the changes coming, I think, was something that we knew right away that, like, okay, we're going to have to really educate our legislative committee and be educated and kind of make those changes. And so it made for a very exciting learning experience for all of us.
Yeah, I can't imagine, with all that change, right? Trying to build these new relationships with the new people and then all these committee chairs and committee members changing. You're in full like build relationships and establish those communications or lines of communications with all these different people. But despite all those challenges, PAR had a very successful season as well. So why don't you share with us some of those
Sure.
big victories?
Yeah. So overall, I mean, I would say that this is probably one of the most successful legislative sessions that we've had in a very long time. In 2023, our legislative committee really voted on 2 key priority pieces of legislation that I'll talk about in a minute. But then also 4 other bills were signed into law. So for a total of 6 bills that we supported. The 2 key priorities were really big ones. So the first was Senate Bill 1173. This legislation dealt with residential wholesaling. So it amended the Real Estate License and Registration Act to require a real estate license for anyone conducting wholesale transactions in the Commonwealth. We worked very closely with Senator Pat Stefano. He is the chairman of the Senate Professional Licensure and Consumer Protection Committee, also a longtime realtor champion, member of the Real Estate Caucus. We've had a great relationship. And he really helped run with this ball, understanding this issue. I know you all are very familiar with wholesaling because I know the city of Philadelphia has tried to take some steps to address wholesaling transactions. It's been a big topic in other states. And I think one of the things that I love about this issue, besides, of course, actually getting it done, is it really showcases our whole advocacy process. So the wholesaling really came up because members came to PAR and they spoke about this issue at what's called our legislative feedback panel. This is a panel that we run at each a set of PAR business meetings, so 3 times a year. And it really is an open forum for realtors to raise issues that they're seeing in their local marketplace. Any of those issues that get raised, they're taken to the full legislative committee, which is a 35-member committee made up of realtors from across the Commonwealth. When the legislative committee was looking at this issue, they decided to form a task force. Task force really dug into the issue, came up with some recommendations back to the legislative committee, and then they ran with that in terms of deciding to craft legislation, work with Chairman Stefano, and really do this thing. So you really can kind of see each of the processes of the governance side of things. And we worked with Stefano for probably about a year and a half trying to craft legislation that's strong and really address this issue and made a difference. And that legislation actually was then it ended up getting introduced in April of 2024. From there, in June, we hold our annual Day on the Hill. So we had about 250 realtors come to Harrisburg to meet with their legislators. I know a number of GPAR members also participated in that. And wholesaling was really a focus of our of that Day on the Hill. So members talking to their House members and their senators, really asking them to support this, explaining what it is, because it can be it can be tricky if you're not really familiar with real estate. You know, what is the idea of assigning a contract, you know, things like that. And so being able to pull experts in to actually talk to their legislators, explain what this is, why this legislation is important, tapping into that grassroots piece was really important to helping us get this done. And with, you know, probably about, I think it was 5 weeks later, our legislation did make it through Senate and House and was signed into law by the governor. And it actually goes into effect coming up here in about a month, just at the beginning of January. So starting then, anyone who wants to conduct residential wholesaling transactions will need a real estate license in Pennsylvania. So major victory for consumers, uniformity and transparency in the Commonwealth, and it's something I know that we're certainly proud of, and I think is going to make a real difference. The second issue that the legislative committee looked at was a legislation that amended the Municipal Code and Ordinance Compliance Act. So for anyone that's not aware, MCOCA is the acronym that we use. MCOCA is a specific state statute that provides direction to municipalities on how they conduct use and occupancy inspections, permit issues at the point of sale. So it's a very narrow statute, but it's one that we actually use a lot because we have hundreds of municipalities across Pennsylvania that when a property is transferring, they require some sort of inspection and permit issued for the property to transfer. When we first started dealing with this issue, probably close to 10 years ago, we were finding that municipalities were stopping real estate transfers for what we would call minor code violations. So things like the sump pump covers missing or other little things, yes, it's a code violation. Or cracked sidewalk, yes, it's a code violation. But should it really mean that a property transfer is stopped? Especially when you get into situations where sometimes sellers under duress, like they don't have the cash to make those repairs. The buyer's willing to make the repairs, but the buyer doesn't own the house yet. And so we were able to amend this law to at the time in 2016 to create a new set of permits. They were temporary permits. So essentially the inspection could happen, the buyer and the seller could negotiate who does the repairs, the transfer could go through, and then within 12 months after transfer, the township or the municipality could come back in, re-inspect to make sure that those violations were remedied. We really looked at this as like this is just common sense. Like no one's saying that we don't want homes and properties up to code, but there's no real reason why we need to just like full stop on doing this. Well, last year, we started to hear that there was some issues on transfers involving multifamily renter occupied properties. So 1 to 4 units, renter occupied, where some municipalities were interpreting MCOCA as meaning that they couldn't issue temporary use permits. So the difference between temporary use and temporary access is access means that you can have access to the property to make repairs, but no one can reside there. Obviously, that's problematic if a tenant is actually in the unit, living there. And so what we did was create legislation that just clarified that a municipality still had the right to issue a temporary use permit involving these transfers, provided, of course, that these were not substantive code violations that impacted habitability and stuff like that. If that's the case, no one should live there, and we certainly know that. But once again, just making that clarification so that we have this. The other big thing of this bill is it tweaked the definition of municipality in the actual Macoka statute and made it very explicitly clear that municipal authorities also were governed by Macoka. We always believed that authorities really fell under the definition, but over the years we've certainly encountered some municipal authorities who have basically said, well, we're not a municipality, we're a municipal authority. And so making sure that any municipal authorities that are conducting these kind of point of sale inspections are also following Macoka to ensure that transfers aren't stopped. That legislation was signed into law in October. It just went into effect actually last week. And so it's another really big victory for the real estate industry in Pennsylvania. And so those were really the two keynote things. And I think it's something that our legislative committee is really thrilled at. We're thrilled with. We're really proud of it, and looking forward to seeing the difference that they're going to actually make in the market moving forward.
Thank you. Congratulations. Like, that's incredible. Given
Congratulations to all of you. You were all part of this too. So
I just, I would be remiss if I didn't express the gratitude of our members to you and your staff for all the hard work for getting those things done. And, passage of, two key priorities in, these challenging issues with all that change is a major achievement. Curious, which one are you most proud of?
yeah.
The legislation
Well,
session.
you kind of hit on it of I think they're kind of tied for me in terms of both because wholesaling was one of those it's been something that many states have been dealing with because really until this law goes into effect anyone can kind of put a shingle out and purport to be a wholesaler and do these sorts of transactions. And so having that consumer protection angle and making sure that everyone just clearly understands what kind of transaction they're entering in, I think is really important. At the same time, Macoka just makes a huge difference just because of the sheer number of municipalities that we have that have these requirements at the point of sale. And so I think if what thing made me the most proud is probably just holistically being able to do good work in such a time of great upheaval and change in Pennsylvania politics, and I really I chalk that up as a testament to how the realtor organization has decided to approach advocacy in such a positive way of when the House flipped from a Republican controlled leadership to a Dem controlled leadership, we really didn't skip a beat in a sense that we talk to everyone. We want to be friends with we want to work with anyone who's willing. We don't care if it's R or a D. And we don't care if you're not in power or you are in power. I mean, obviously, look, sometimes you have to focus a little more of your time and effort on decision makers in those positions. Excuse me. But we're not, for years, we cultivated strong relationships with many Democratic members in the House because they were great on our issues. They supported real estate. And making sure that we maintained those relationships were really important to us. And so when the House did change, I think we felt pretty confident of, hey, we've got a lot of really good friends and a lot of good advocates for the real estate industry that are now in these new positions. And sure, we might need to get them up to speed on a certain issue or thing like that. But we felt really good about where we were one-on-one. And I think that truly is a testament to our organization. It's a testament to our grassroots. I mean, members spending time developing relationships with their local delegations, all of them, D's, R's, putting that time in. And so I think it always puts us into a position where even if there is change, we can navigate that probably a lot better than maybe many others. And so I think that to me makes me the most proud of. It kind of shows that the system that we put in place really is such a great way to go about advocating for the real estate industry at the state level.
Great. And I had the opportunity to have my first day on the Hill visit, so I took part, and
Excellent.
yeah, it was very, very interesting, and a lot of what you said, like just getting the opportunity to sit there and really explain to these officials what it looked like on that front line, on that ground level, and how these different things affected the situation was pretty interesting, and I really really enjoyed it. But it would not have been possible without all of the efforts of you guys building those relationships, getting us in the door, and giving us the opportunity to talk to them. Um, we talked a lot about the legislative and the policy side of the association's activities. Um, can we discuss some of the association's political activities? I know, only a month ago we had a general election. Pennsylvania's RPAC was very involved in the state and Senate houses, right? Can you talk about some of those
Sure.
activities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can speak for a lot of Pennsylvanians. I just relieved that we're back to just seeing prescription drug commercials in Pennsylvania finally. So, yeah, the 2024 general election, the people will be studying this for, decades and centuries into the future, I think. Obviously, of course, Pennsylvania was kind of the epicenter. I'm not saying anything that you all don't know in terms of the presidential race. Obviously, a very highly competitive United States Senate race, congressional races. All 203 members of the Pennsylvania House were up for re-election, as well as half of the Pennsylvania Senate, so 25 members there. In terms of our activity, obviously as a state association, our state RPAC trustees are really focused on state level races. So really Pennsylvania House and Pennsylvania Senate. I believe there was somewhere around about 140 to 150 incumbents, so both House and Senate, that had challenges in the election. So the rest of those up for re-election were unopposed. And our RPAC trustees, what they do is they work very closely with local realtor associations across the Commonwealth in making endorsement decisions heading into elections. And so heading into the general election, the trustees looked at all the races across all the competitive races across the state, and they ultimately decided to make endorsement decisions in 106 races. I told the RPAC trustees after the election, a few weeks after, once the last House race was called, that I really was completely impressed with their crystal ball, because with an election with so many different surprises, they did surprisingly very well. So well that they actually 106 races that they endorsed, all 106 of our endorsed candidates were successful in their elections. It's remarkable, really. I'm not sure that we've ever had 100%, so I guess this is, the nadir. But really, and in terms of party balance, I think it was very close to 50-50 in terms of R's and D's. And so we're really proud on the PAC side of things, because there were some key races where we had some really good friends facing very difficult circumstances. I'm sure you guys in Philly, if you followed from the Enquirer's coverage, the last House race to be called, which actually determined who was going to control the House, was House District 72. Chairman Frank Burns from Cambria County, the Johnstown area, was running for re-election. Chairman Burns, also a member of our real estate caucus, a true champion of realtor issues since he's been in the House. He's a great representative. He's been great to work with on so many issues. This past session, he became the chair of the House Professional Licensure Committee, a very, very important committee to us as well. And that really was the epicenter of the fight to control the House. Our PAC trustees put in a lot of resources to support him, because, as I said, he's just been a great advocate for your industry. He understands real estate. He understands the important role that it serves, and has just been so supportive. He was very helpful working on wholesaling issues, because obviously Senator Stefano's wholesaling bill, that was the committee that it went through on the House. And so, winning that one was particularly helpful and sweet for us, because, again, we want to back those that back us. And I think that's a real example. But not just there. I mean, we've had some other competitive seats. I know we did a lot of work on the Senate side for incumbent Senator Devlin Robinson out of Allegheny County, a Republican who was running in a tight race Same with Senator Dan Laughlin from the Erie area. Two great voices for us in real estate issues in terms of their support and understanding and just great vote history. And so it is kind of still remarkable. I'm pinching myself of like really 100%. I don't, even, usually there's one or two surprises. And especially this year. But I think that the trustees it's a testament to once again how they do their work. And, from the advocacy side, the grassroots side, but from the RPAC side, they spend a lot of time and effort. I know our local associations, members, government affairs directors spend a lot of time and effort into the running for open seats, things like that. And so I think that deliberative process and really then coming together, discussing and what makes the most sense, in terms of backing a realtor champion it's a process that's very important. And it's one that all 20 trustees take very seriously. And so I think being able to have such a successful election season, especially when there was a lot of surprises, outside of that, I think that's just a real testament to them and how they go about their business.
So I definitely think a lot of people were surprised by a lot of different things, right? You
Sure.
talked about a bunch of them. What was the one thing that surprised you most out of all those surprises?
I actually do think for me it was we saw obviously we saw the presidential race flip, so a Dem to a Republican. That in and of itself didn't surprise me as much. I mean, I think as a political scientist and a student of election history, anytime you have a controlling party whose poll numbers are this low, where people are really concerned about the economy and inflation, like all of that stuff, not shocking eventually if the voting electorate decides to switch to the other party, that sort of thing. Um, I think for me, it was that it didn't seem as much to translate down to state level legislative races, and the idea that really we have the status quo, in a sense that. Come January, the House of Representatives is going to be 102 Dem to 101 Republican, which is exactly what it was last session. The Senate's also going to be the same, 28 Republican to 22 Dem, although that one was a little different, as you guys from Philly know. Incumbent Senator Jimmy Dillon, a Democrat from the 5th District, lost re-election to Senator-elect Pecosi. But on the other side, the Dems actually picked up a seat in and around the Harrisburg area, that flipped. Senator-elect Patty Kim is going to be joining the Senate. She's a former representative for a long time. So there was some shakeup there. But I think it's none of the, we were watching probably, I would say about a dozen races where we're like, any of these probably could break either way. In some of those races, obviously we had our preference because we wanted our endorsed candidate to win, obviously. But I think, it would have been not surprising, said, they flipped 1, 2, and 3, or this party flipped 1, 2, and 4. And you didn't really see that as much. We saw it at the federal level. Obviously, we had two congressional races in the Lehigh Valley and outside of Scranton. Those incumbent congressmen were defeated and the seats flipped. Obviously, our U.S. Senate seat flipped. And so you kind of saw that performance like either statewide or at the national level, but not as much down. And I think that probably overall that's what surprises me the most. We'll be digging into all of like sort of the data that as it comes in terms of vote data, because I know we've started to see a few things where, okay, an incumbent House member X won, but when you actually look at the performance, their margin narrowed from a year before, that sort of thing. And so I think, over these next 6 months, we're really going to be doing a deep dive as to kind of what happened there. But just from sort of first blush, I was like, well, if the national races were going in the direction that it was, does that mean a lack of coattails? Does it mean something else? And I think that's the thing that probably surprised me and what we'll be looking at and researching in the most moving forward.
So great, because that's where my next question was going, right? Looking ahead for that 25, 26 session, what's it look like? What are some of your,
Sure.
um, focuses on and the activities, and what do you see upcoming for PAR?
Right. Right. So, I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, as somewhat scary as it was when the 2023-2024 session kicked off, of not necessarily knowing like how things were going. This year, I think it's a little bit more interesting in that, yep, we have a divided legislature again. Yep, we are used to that. In terms of the majority leaders of both chambers, they're the same. Matt Bradford from Montgomery County is going to remain the House leader. And then Joe Pittman from Indiana County will remain the Senate leader. And so I think, I think we're we're optimistic and looking forward to hitting the ground running. In terms of what we know now, and then there's some other stuff that we'll have to kind of find out. Last month, all four of the caucuses did their own internal leaderships elections, and so as I said, no major change on the House Democratic leadership, no major changes on the Senate Republican leadership. Where we did see some changes was actually in the House Republican caucus. So they've elected a new leader of their caucus. His name's Jesse Topper. He's from Bedford County. He previously was the chair of the minority chair of the House Education Committee. And actually, they also had some additional new members of leadership. Martina White from Philadelphia, she maintained her leadership position. She was a leader last year, great friend of ours too. So we're looking forward to working with her. But you do have a new leadership of that caucus, the new appropriations chair, Jim Struzzi, who's also from Indiana. He's going to be the new Republican House appropriations chairman. And so we're, navigating and seeing sort of how that new leadership team meshes together and what they do. That'll certainly be interesting. On the Senate Dem side, the only real change in leadership was their policy chair. Senator Nick Miller from Allentown actually was elected the policy chairman. This is wonderful for us because Senator Miller is an active realtor. He's a member of the Greater Lehigh Valley Association. He's a great friend to our industry, really understands your industry as a member of it. And so he was first elected 2 years ago. So we're looking forward to working with him in this new leadership role. It's great for him. So we kind of know the leadership. Well, at least we know who the leadership personnel is, even if we don't necessarily, we'll see how it kind of plays out. The one thing we are waiting to hear for is committee chairs, because we are expecting some changes both in the House and Senate on some of our key committees. Just for everyone's benefit, we obviously work very closely with the professional licensure committees in both chambers. Any of our licensing bills or issues related to real estate licensing obviously go through those two committees, so they're very important to us. We're also very focused on the House Housing Committee, as well as the Senate Urban Affairs Committee. So a lot of housing related bills, things like that go through those two committees. The House Housing absolutely will have a change in chair, as Chairman Mike Sterla from Lancaster County. He retired last year, so he's moving on, I think, to spending time with grandchildren and having more fun in Florida, which is great for him. He deserves it. It was a great friend of ours. We're certainly sad to see him go, but wish him all the best. And so we know we're going to have a new chairman of that committee on the Dem side, and then there's going to be other probably chairmanship changes by virtue of just retirements in other positions, things like that. And so once we kind of get a clearer picture of that, I think we'll be, in a great position regardless of who it is, obviously, but just knowing that and kind of getting a sense of how those new chairmen are going to run their committees, things like that, we just have to wait for now on that. In terms of issues and things coming forward, I know our legislative committee is actually getting together the first full week of January to kind of lay out the upcoming session. So I don't have specific bills or things like that I can share in terms of topics, but I know we have some issues that carry over from last session that the committee worked on, and I know there's some other real estate related issues that certainly are coming down the pike that they're probably going to take a look at. And so once we kind of get into that time of the year, we'll have a little bit of a better sense of what they might be looking at in terms of priorities. The one thing I would want to mention is, we deal with each June, the Pennsylvania legislature must approve a budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Constitutionally, June 30th, although That could be a fungible constitutionality, I suppose. But generally speaking, the goal is by June 30th to have a budget in place. And so what's interesting is even though we're 2 years off of this, we have to remember that now we have a governor running for reelection. So we are entering these next two budget cycles where Governor Shapiro is in effect going to be running for reelection. So the last two budget negotiation cycles, I would say, have been pretty cordial. And each caucus, understanding that the Republicans want certain things, the Dems want certain things, and kind of negotiating and going back and forth. And so what we're interested to see is what if anything, that if that dynamic shifts, are there some different priorities that they can't get along, do they get aligned? We'll kind of have to wait and see. But in terms of where we're at, I think one of the other things I was thinking about when you asked the question about most proud, I should probably also plug this, and that's our legislative committee. I think we have made some tweaks to the committee structure, but this past year, our committee really just hit it out of the park in terms of, I think, taking a 10,000-foot view strategic approach to legislation. I'm probably not going to surprise anyone when I say that government has changed a lot over the last 20 years. I mean, I think at all levels in all states, what you've seen is sort of a reduction in the amount of legislation that gets done. There's probably a variety of reasons for that we don't have to take a poli-sci class to get into today. But I think we've been able to navigate that and make some strategic decisions, compromising where necessary to and making some of those choices that really helped us to be successful. That is straight a testament to them and kind of taking that strategic view. Our outgoing chair, Glenn Yoder, is from the Lancaster County Association, did a fantastic job. He's going to be passing the baton to Mark Kibbe, who's from the Greater Erie Association, to take over for the next 2 years. And so I think they've done a tremendous job of navigating the committee. They've had such great discussions and really got us into positions where I think really helped us get good stuff done. And as a staff member, I have to say I can't ask for anything more than that from a committee. They've just been a great partnership to work with. And I expect that that's going to continue next year. And I think it's just going to put us in a really good position to make meaningful public policy that impacts the industry and consumers moving forward.
That's awesome. And listening to you is incredible, because for the non-poli-sci members, major members, right? A lot of this is new to some of our members.
Mm-hmm.
Some of our members are extremely active and sit on these committees and volunteer their time to participate in that. But I think one of the goals of our coffee talk today is to hit on all these points, but then if you could just touch on how important it is for our members that maybe don't know too much about this to come and engage and listen to this, or even come up to Harrisburg at one of the meetings and just participate to see what interest they might have to help moving forward, right?
Absolutely. Because I know this is actually one of the things, Jeff Dempsey on my team, one of our two bang up great lobbyists, he and Marcus Huertas are sort of our boots on the ground in the Capitol day in and day out, and they do a fantastic job. Jeff is also the staff liaison to our legislative committee, and I know this is one of the drums he's been beating when members reach out that maybe show a little bit of interest in the committee. We routinely get but I don't really understand how state government works, or I don't have like personal relationships with elected officials. That is more than okay. That's what we're here for. We do this. We'll prepare you. We're going to give you the information. We're going to educate you and help navigate through this. What we're looking for is, are you thoughtful? Will you put in the time and the effort, read the materials? Most importantly, give it some thought as to how this potential piece of legislation might change the way that you do business, or impact the industry, or impact property ownership. That's really what we need. I'm not a realtor. I don't know how to do what you all do on a day in, day out basis. And so It's really that partnership working together. Hey, it's also great if you do have that background and knowledge and great relationships with your elected officials. That's a nice little bonus, but that is certainly not a requirement to getting involved with our legislative committee, number one. And number two, it's not a requirement at all to participate in a multitude of grassroots efforts or to invest in RPAC, none of that. I think you talked a little bit, Chris, about Hill Day. One of the things that I love about Hill Day is, besides just realtors being in the building, and the General Assembly, by the way, very much knows when it's Realtor Day on the Hill. They know the realtors are here. Yep, here they come. But it's about being able to be together with your colleagues through local associations and other members. But also, we're gonna prepare you. We put together comprehensive talking points, answer questions. Like, our goal is, we get it. You may not have been around the Capitol. I mean, most of us are always flitting and floating around because the Capitol can be a little confusing in terms of directions, and maps are not always the most helpful because it's an old building with several additions. So anyway, the biggest thing is, we're going to give you those resources and those tools, answer questions, and try to make sure that you're the most prepared that you possibly can be to talk about this. But at the end of the day, always keeping in mind what you're talking about is going to be something that really is about how a particular policy might positively or negatively impact our industry, and how that impacts what you do on a daily basis. And so I think anyone that brings that to the table, we can help with the rest, and we can give you that information. But just kind of bringing that thoughtfulness on how something might impact what we're doing in our professional lives, that's the most important thing for us. And I think it's something that any member can do, and I encourage them to do it.
Yeah, you said, you don't do what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-mm.
I certainly don't have the skill set that you have, or am able to do what you do on a day-to-day basis. So I have much appreciation for all those efforts. And I do, think it's really important for our members to understand, as much as we try to articulate it in conversations and literature, in, things that we put out in programs and events, where that money goes and all the work that's behind it to build those relationships, to make sure we have that seat at the table, to make sure our voice is heard. But not only that, but having those thoughtful representatives from the realtor side as well to voice their opinions and help articulate it to those other people as well. So
Right.
just wanted to put that in the messaging too. Um, I'm going to open it up for any questions. We're getting close to time, but obviously we record this. This goes out, and we try to push our members to take time to watch and digest all this. But of any of our people on, anyone have any questions? Please feel free to raise your hand.
Hey, Chris, I'd like to jump in. This is definitely like the relationship business that we're all in. And it's really important for us to go ahead and to talk about the direct line, the relationship that we have with PAR. We have folks that are participatory in those various committees that Sherri is talking about, representing a perspective from our jurisdiction. So, you heard earlier Lancaster County and Erie and Bedford. Philadelphia is very well represented out there. Immediate past president is Al Perry. Heather Patron-Shook was just elected treasurer for next year. We have our district vice president, who is Stephanie Biello, one of our past presidents. And then we have someone like Jack Malloy, who has served on the legislative committee and in various capacities and task force out at PAR for time out of mind. So, that relationship that we have with them is not just going to the Capitol either. We depend upon Sherri and her team to give us help and insight on things that we do here on a local level as well. So sometimes we need to go ahead and bounce ideas off. We got to figure out a strategy. Sometimes she may be aware of something that's happening, maybe out in Pittsburgh, that we have no idea about what's going on there. And we're able to compare notes about what they're doing, the hurdles that they're facing, or maybe a pathway to success on something. So it's really great that we have that opportunity. We go ahead and look back when we had elections here for every seat there in City Hall, pretty much all City Council and the mayor's office. We worked very hard and for a very long time with Sherri and other folks with her team to support the various candidates that were champions for us and our initiatives here on the local level. So the relationship is super strong, and we're very dialed in and connected with those things, and we're grateful for that. But it translates right here into our City Hall, so it's just not limited to what happens in the state capitol. So we're appreciative of that, Sherri. Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure. I look at this as beneficial for both organizations. I think Pennsylvania really excels, in my humble opinion, on this. But the partnerships that we have with local associations, particularly on the advocacy side, whether that is through partnerships with local associations that have their own government affairs director, or if they're local associations that's part of what's called our field representative program. We work together all the time. We meet weekly via Zoom. That has been that came out of COVID, and it was actually it's been a huge benefit to both of us, because what it is it's really information sharing, it's ears on the ground. We might hear something from someone in one area that we find out, oh, that issue might be coming up at the state Senate or the state House, and vice versa. Like we talk to reps and senators where they might say, well, I have this municipality in my area. Well, that gives us the benefit of being able to pick up the phone and call the GAD or the field rep to be like, hey, heads up on this. And really, it's just been, I think, it has been a partnership that has really thrived over the last 2.5 decades. And I'm looking forward to just doing a lot more good things with it as we build year after year moving forward.
So I got a question in here in the chat. Elizabeth wants to know, and this is a subject area in which we're constantly dealing with things locally, and that goes into the rental space. So do you have any updates on legislation for rental properties? Does RPAC work on landlord/tenant legislation?
Oh yes, we landlord tenant stuff is actually quite active with our association. So and it's been an interesting dynamic over these last 2 years. We've certainly seen legislation get through and get signed into the governor, but we've also seen that maybe House and Senate don't necessarily quite line up in terms of what they think about a particular issue. But in addition, we obviously anything that impacts that space, we obviously monitor. Depending on movement, our legislative committee may take positions on it. I think most recently, this legislation did not get signed into law, but we very much expect it to be reintroduced next year, was legislation dealing with the sealing of eviction records. And so our legislative committee actually worked with the prime sponsor in the House on this legislation. The initial draft version threw up some real concerns for us in a whole bunch of ways. And we were able to have a very meaningful and positive working relationship with the prime sponsor of the legislation to amend it, that essentially eviction records would be sealed after 7 years. And so this is something that I think it's a bipartisan effort. There's certainly members of Dems and Republicans that are supportive of the bill. It ran into a few hiccups here towards the end, and really then, quite frankly, ran out of time. But we very much expect that to come back up next year. Obviously, we're always, like you all, keeping a very close ear to the ground on any sniff of rent control. Much like GPAR, the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors is adamantly opposed to rent control. We think it's just a very, very misguided public policy. We certainly understand what those that support it, are trying to do, and we really just strongly believe that going that path does the exact opposite of what those people intend. And so, working on those issues. We also believe, I think, rental issues really tie into just the overall housing market. Obviously, we know we are seeing this crisis of low inventory, really just low affordability in general. And our legislative committee is definitely going to be looking, it has been looking and continue to look at ways that state government might be able to make a difference in this space. We simply don't have enough houses. And I think it really is that simple. And we're seeing that certainly putting pressure on prices. And we're getting to the point where there's, whole segments of our population that just can't afford to purchase a home. And that's not the way that's not good. And so working on those issues, and I think that ties into, obviously we've seen rental prices going up, things like that. I think those two are related. And so we obviously will continue to monitor anything in that space, and advocate for the best interest of the industry moving forward.
Okay. Yeah, it's a hot button thing. It seems like, and it's coming from different angles. A whole lot of creativity, and also too, you have this thing where the style and the substance seem to kind of collide, because stylistically we have some folks who on the elected officials who are stylistically trying to introduce something that gets them some headlines, appeases certain constituencies, but then the substance comes into play in which it has these unintended consequences and actually really works against what they're trying to do. And it's like, makes it very, very hard, particularly when a piece of legislation is introduced and now you're working with from a bad point of origin. It's going to be something we're going to be dealing with here locally, no doubt. And we'll be reaching out to Sherri for some direction and guidance for sure.
Anytime.
So we have one last question here in the chat, and that's coming in from Emily. She's asking, what are some future things that you guys are looking at legislatively? And she said that she heard somewhere out there was a mention of inheritance tax. So we'll just throw that to you.
Sure. So good news is not at the state level. But I think this is a good plug for keeping an eye on what NAR's advocacy efforts are, because taxes are going to be a huge thing at a federal level over the next 6 months. So, obviously, President-elect Trump ran on a platform of extending the tax cuts that he initially passed in 2017. A lot of those tax provisions are set to expire, and a number of them do certainly impact real estate. And so I know NAR has already been working at that federal level to do what it can to try to protect those tax benefits that have been very beneficial to our industry. So I'm thinking, Emily, that probably on the inheritance tax is probably a national issue, and it'll all be tied up into that. So I really think that's probably number one on their list in terms of over the next 6 months, what you're going to see out of NAR advocacy.
All right, cool. No more questions in the chat, Chris.
I don't see any more questions, but I'm going to wrap it up if you're okay with that, Matt.
Yeah, let's do it.
I just want to, again, just express my sincere gratitude, Sherri, for taking the time. Really appreciate your perspective, but most importantly, all your hard work and your efforts. Thank you for doing this. And, hopefully, again, this just helps us increase our membership's knowledge, understanding, and hopefully, getting them more involved to help you and continue that communication and make sure we're pulling our fair share of helping you on the Hill there with all these things. So thank you so much.
Hey,
thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. I'm happy to come back whenever you ask. So really appreciate it. I hope you all have a great weekend.
Hey, Sherri,
Right,
just want to say thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherri.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you, guys.